Welcome back into the podcast. Excited to do this guest. It's actually the first time he's been on this podcast. He is a longtime member of the Chicago Bears beat for the Chicago Tribune. He is Dan Wiederer, and he joins me now. Dan, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
Great, Bill. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to talk.
Absolutely. There's a few things I wanted to get in on this podcast, but I'm going to rewind the clock a couple years because I want to go back to 2022 because the last couple episodes of this podcast, I've been working on kind of putting the Justin Fields era to bed and moving forward because I don't think it's going to be healthy for anyone to keep going back to it. But I did want to talk to you about it specifically because when we rewind to 2022, and of course that was the terrible season, but Justin Fields had those explosive games in that 4 or 5 game stretch there, you were still pretty consistent in terms of what Justin Fields was not doing. And I think perhaps fans and even some media were being blinded by the explosive runs and not seeing enough with the arm in the passing game. And you were pretty consistent about things that needed to be done in the fourth quarter, things that he needed to clean up. And a lot of people, myself included, and I will absolutely say, I'm like, oh, there's Dan again, knocking the poor guy. But truth be told, when you see 2023 play out, you were really the first to the table here kind of pointing these things out. And a lot of the issues that you were pointing out in 2022, where everyone said, well, give him a DJ Moore, give him more talent, give him a better offensive line. All that's going to get cleaned up. And it didn't. And we saw kind of some static passing numbers. So I want to ask you, going back to the 2022 tape, what were you seeing? Like, what was jumping at you that you were saying, no, there's something here that really needs to be corrected?
Well, first and foremost, as we get into this discussion, I want you to know that I will always be honest. And with my honesty, I will tell you that I have a small shred of my personality that can be petty. And I joked with a buddy that said, I wish I had enough money to hire someone to go find some receipts for me that I could go back on and just not to do an I told you so to people, but just to try to get people to understand where the misconceptions and the misplaced rage and all the other things that you obviously have experienced and seen mushroom up over the last few years here in the Fields discussion started. For me, Bill, I think there, like being around this league and understanding what high level quarterback play actually is, you see things through a different lens. Number one, starting point for me with any quarterback that I'll cover is with a basic understanding that playing quarterback in the NFL at a high level is one of the most difficult tasks in all of professional sports. So if you're asking questions, the instinct should be to ask more questions, not say, close enough, we'll figure it out, right? Because the failure rate at that position in this league is so massive that your default setting should be quarterback X is likely not going to be a star until he has shown me irrefutable evidence over multiple years that he's going to be a star, right? And so I think there was, because of what you mentioned, the adrenaline rush, the intoxication of some of the wonderful things that Justin did, the incredible plays that he made to rush ahead and believe that he had cleared checkpoints that he hadn't yet cleared. And so along with that quarterback discussion, you think about things that make great quarterbacks. Number one, you have to turn your flashes into consistency. You have to show a requisite level of comfort and competence within the pocket as a passer. You have to have production as a passer that is undeniable. And most importantly, which I think was being missed, and this is where this discussion I think got kind of supercharged in 22, since you brought up that season, you have to be able to take over games in the clutch. And you have to be the reason that following week turns into a victory week rather than a troubleshooting, we lost, we've got to figure some things out week. And there were just so many moments where you would get all the great stuff, but then you wouldn't get those finishing touches that sort of confirm that you're on the right track to becoming a high-level quarterback. There were a lot of people, understandably, who were fueled by hope, who were fueled by emotion, who wanted to just say, he's going to get there. And they wanted to clear him through checkpoints that he hadn't yet cleared. And I'll always be like, hold on, pump the brakes. Let's stay where we are and let's make sure we see evidence to clear the checkpoint before we move on and say that he's reached the next stage of his development, which clearly we saw at the end of 2023. He just had kind of hit a plateau and hit some barriers into becoming that next level star.
Yeah, and you bring up the fourth quarter and what you're doing with the game on the line kind of thing. And that's the one thing that never fit for me, is because when you see a quarterback like Justin that can play out of structure, buy time with his legs, find a guy down the field. And it was the in structure play, right? And playing on time and the things that he really struggled with. To me, those type of players that can make things happen out of nothing and can scramble drill and find a guy, which we saw him do a lot in quarters 1, 2, and 3, probably too much for Luke Getsy's, preference in terms of, hey, man, run the play that I want you to run. But to me, that's the kind of quarterback that should, really exceed expectations in the fourth quarter, even more so than what they do in structure when they struggle in that. And seeing Fields not be able to do that, that was one thing to me. Like, I couldn't comprehend as an evaluator, why can't Justin perform better in the fourth quarter? And even as a fan base, you could see them so desperate for it, because the Vikings game towards the end of the season where he found DJ Moore and set up the game-winning field goal, like that was like the see Justin can do it for the entire fan base. And I actually talked about that game afterwards, after I had kind of rewatched the film on the All-22, and said, actually, guys, and forget the fumble that he had at the beginning of the fourth quarter.
Two fumbles.
that drive, I mean, the play before, Darnell Mooney's streaking wide open with his arm up. ESB's in the corner on a nice out and is open. And you could even argue that Fields, it was an intentional grounding that wasn't called by the official. So even in a game-winning drive where he got it done, the bottom line is there were still so many flaws. And this is a quarterback that had 3 game-winning drives, and one of them was literally taking a knee against the Texans after the Roquan Smith interception.
Well, you just hit on it, right? It was 1 per season, literally 1 per season. It was the Pittsburgh. In terms of the way I calculated it, was the ball in your hands, 8 minutes or less to go, with a chance to tie or go ahead. And he was 3 for 23 over his 38 starts with the Bears, and being able to capitalize in those situations. He gave them the lead in Pittsburgh as a rookie. And that was a game, if everybody rewinds to 21 and thought, man, that's the it factor that we talk about. Monday night, bright lights, back against the wall, and made plays. You mentioned the kneel down against the Texans. Ugly football game. You win because you get an interception, you get it. And then the Vikings game, which, the actual game-winning drive, you can nitpick in it, but it was there. It also came after 2 fourth quarter fumbles where you probably shouldn't have been in that position, and you were lucky to get the ball back because your defense held and stiffened at the right time to get you one more last crack at it. And so, look, I think Justin's fourth quarter career rating is in the 60s. I think it was in the low 50s this past season. There was just undeniable statistical and visual evidence that he wasn't comfortable winning from the pocket in winning time. And that's a prerequisite in this league. It just is. I mean, Patrick Mahomes didn't play the best game in the Super Bowl in February, but when they needed him to go lead game winning or game tying drives, what did he do? Time and time again, he does it. And what that does is it creates that belief, Bill. And that's what was constantly lacking with the Bears. And Ryan Poles talked about it coming out of 22, is saying, like, we need to turn hope into belief. We need to turn that idea of like, oh man, we really got to get something done, to we are going to get something done. And they just never were able to cross that bridge. Now, Justin, to his credit, made growth in his 3rd season. It just wasn't enough, and it wasn't fast enough. And you see some things like his ability to be an on-the-move passer instead of just an on-the-move runner. They got better, but it still was just progressing to sort of a middle tier level in the NFL, where you see the greats who can extend plays and then just kill you with the ability to find a completion down the field and not have to rely on scrambling and running and doing the things that made Justin so gifted and breathtaking. But those things, what I came to understand through the Justin Fields' experience, is not only do they, present opportunities for you to get injured, which brings up the durability question, which was never fully answered either, but they consume fuel. And that was something I really came to appreciate, is that when you're running around all afternoon as a quarterback, maybe some of that creeps into how you can play down the stretch of a fourth quarter, because you've used so much mental and physical energy to get to that point where you see the great ones that are still, full fuel tank at the end and able to come through and make sharp decisions and good throws and big plays when it matters most.
Yeah. And look, and I think Fields is, I wasn't around him obviously as much as you guys were on the beat, but I was able to meet him a couple times. He's a great guy. He's clearly a great locker room guy, and he's got special talent, and hopefully Pittsburgh can figure out a way, and Arthur Smith can figure out a way to unlock that. But we move on here and kind of pivoting with that 2023 season.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say one more thing on the topic, just because I think, first of all, I think you and I probably both learned through the experience how toxic social media is and how much it taints, the productive discourse. Right. And I think that is something I'm trying to guide myself as we go forward in the next year of Bears football, is to not be so immersed in what the social media reaction is, because I think it supercharges everything. And then you get exaggerated praise to things that doesn't deserve exaggerated praise. And then you get, vehement pushback to the exaggerated praise. And then everybody just gets more and more polar, and it gets ugly, as you know. I think what probably bothered me the most as a reporter in the center of all that is there were people actively trying to misunderstand what we were seeing on the football field. And then worse than that, there were folks that were trying to discredit well-sourced, informed people who were trying to provide, emotion-free, grounded analysis of what was happening that would lead you to understanding what the ultimate result of this was going to be, which ended up being a trade of Justin Fields and a pivot in a new direction with the number 1 pick here coming up later this month. And so that's just kind of 2 little bows I wanted to tie in the conversation, because it was a wild 3 years. It really was.
Sure was.
I wish Justin the best. I feel like he and I had a good relationship in that locker room. I think he's a tough, competitive, well-liked, smart, athletic, explosive dude who's going to get opportunity. When you have as much as he has in his skill set, he's going to get another opportunity to revive his career. We'll see where he takes it. But certainly you rode the roller coaster like I did for the last 3 years, and you see the way it can get kind of hijacked by people that are just stuck in their ways and stubborn with their opinions and trying to steer the conversation to meet what they believe is their reality.
Right. And that's the thing. And kind of as we're pivoting here to Caleb Williams and the 2024 Bears. And look, and I said it on my podcast that I sit there and I'm trying to, be professional with it and everything. And I know, you guys can see what's being said when you are active on social media. And I put out a tweet in October that ended up going completely viral. And it was just, I was speaking with someone I knew, a good, well-respected analyst, who said, look, there's nothing Justin Fields can do to avoid the Bears taking Caleb Williams if they have the number 1 pick. He's too good of a prospect. Reset the quarterback clock, the financial question with Fields, everything, he talked about it. And I put it out, and that somehow made me it didn't matter how many times I said, I love Justin, I hope it works with Justin. Didn't matter. It was, I became that I'm just trying to tear down Justin Fields. And it became this bipolar, but not bipolar, this polarizing conversation throughout the year. And it became this Team Fields against Team Caleb thing. And look, even some of the guys on the beat and that are covering the team, the 180s I've seen from some of the guys in the media who were just like, oh, he stunk against Notre Dame. He's not the quarterback for the Bears, to this guy's going to be the greatest quarterback we ever seen. Literally, I've seen the guys do the 180. So it's almost frustrating for me to sit there and say, there were guys covering this team that were consistent, and it doesn't even matter at this point, because everyone's now pivoted and everyone's going forward, which I guess overall is better for the mental health of fans.
Let's start a GoFundMe and get people to we'll hire an intern to go dig up some of the receipts, and we'll just bring those back. Like I said, there's a little bit of pettiness in me that would love to do that one day and just take that lap.
Yeah, that was the as much petty I got. I did a few retweets tonight of the Justin Fields trade but what we move on. So when we move on, let's talk about Caleb Williams a little bit. There's a few things I want to get into beyond Caleb, but look, this is a guy, and talking to people around the league, he is a special prospect. People get mad if you use generational or whatever you want to do, but I talked to a guy who's been around the league for almost 50 years. And he told me he thinks he's one of the top 5 QB prospects of the last 50 years, basically putting him with Elway, Manning, Luck, in that. He goes, rank him however you want to rank him, but this is his level of talent and his level of ability. You hear guys like Brian Baldinger talk about that when he was in high school, his whiteboard ability was as good as NFL quarterbacks. And so he has a grasp of the game. And I think people are learning that in structure is something he can do. And this isn't just the Justin Fields clone, that he can play on time and he can do certain things. And the thing that I love the most about him, Dan, is that release that he has, which for me watching football in my lifetime, Dan Marino and Aaron Rodgers were the kings of just the lightning quick release, flick of the wrist, 50 yards down the field throw. And he has that ability, which can get you out of so many jams when you can get the ball out that quickly with that kind of velocity. I think he's a fun prospect, and I think that Bears fans should just be united and be excited about this.
Well, I'm working on something for after the draft about how Chicago has never experienced anything like this. They will never have had a quarterback walk into their building with the number of gifts that Caleb Williams has to potentially clear the hurdle that hasn't been cleared in 104 seasons, right? The idea of becoming the Bears' forever quarterback and the guy that can be the engine of sustained success. At the same time, Caleb Williams, and we can get into this in a few minutes, it has never seen anything like Chicago because of the scar tissue, because of the expectation and the patience levels and everything that has come before him. He's going to have to develop that emotional equilibrium and that stability to be really, really what Justin was, just firm and steady and really thick-skinned through a lot of turbulent moments. So we'll see where that goes. But when it comes to the gifts, you mentioned two things there. It seems like there's two trigger words during the pre-draft process for people that wanted to resist believing in the hype of Caleb Williams, and it was generational. So I've tried to stop using that. And Mahomes, right? Like that's the other one that triggers people, and they go, "What are you telling us? He's going to win 3 Super Bowls after his first 6 seasons starting?" It's like, no. Like when people in the league compare Caleb Williams to Patrick Mahomes, what they're telling you is he has an ability to play off script and do things from odd arm angles with feel, with an understanding of the game and an understanding of what the 21 other guys are doing at the same time. That is elite. And you saw it in college repeatedly. We saw Patrick Mahomes use that to become a next level star in this league, maybe the best of all time by the time it's all said and done. And so nobody is saying that Caleb Williams is going to reach the heights that Patrick Mahomes has reached, but they're saying that there are traits within there that give you a chance to unlock some things that a lot of other quarterbacks can't unlock because they don't have those gifts. The other thing you mentioned there is the quick release. And early in the process, when I was talking to Daniel Jeremiah of the NFL Network, who I think does a great job of breaking down prospects, he just talked about his hands and how quick his hands are. And that's part of the release process where because you're so quick, you can hit some of these baked in easy completions, catch a snap, throw it, get 7 yards to DJ Moore, and now it's 2nd and 3, right? Just because we didn't ask you to do much and you did it really well, and that's something I think that Justin struggled with a little bit, where you saw some of the just absolutely mind blowing passing incompetence statistics where you're like, whoa, wait a second. Like they were, at 150 net passing yards and like half of his 38 starts or less, like that doesn't make sense. And part of that is because you weren't able to get these easy ones, like 4 or 5, 7 or 8 yard completions where you weren't asked to do much, which then pad your stat total, which then move a drive, which then turn a punt into a field goal into a touchdown, and on you go. Look, there's a ton in Caleb Williams' skill set that is just incredible to watch. And it's going to be really interesting to watch the Bears get their hands on him and try to, I don't want to say rein it in, but try to figure out what the sweet spot is for him in using his gifts without over relying on him in terms of the off script stuff. Because I think even Caleb Williams would admit that this last season, maybe he got, because of the lack of offensive protection up front from the line, and because they were playing chase games a lot because their defense stunk, that he resulted to playing hero ball a little too often. And so the Bears are going to have to rein that in a little bit without, taking away those gifts. And I think that's going to be a challenge for Matt Eberflus, because one of the biggest worries I have, Bill, is pairing Caleb Williams with a defensive-minded coach who is going to stress taking care of the ball at all turns and maybe a little less willing to live with some mistakes that allow the artist to be the artist. And so, I think that's going to be a growth moment for Matt to figure out how to handle that, because he doesn't have any documented success of developing a quarterback. And this is going to be a huge challenge for him after the Bears gave him a vote of confidence in January to oversee this whole thing.
Yeah, and you bring up Eberflus, so I'll ask you about this, because to me that 2-0-0 thing that he did with Fields, that made a lot of sense for Justin Fields, because he was trying to get him to do certain things with the football and be smarter about things. But I'll tell you what, if that's the kind of thing, if that's the kind of approach he does with Caleb Williams, that's going to take away Caleb Williams. Like Joe Burrow, I remember, said a couple of years ago that he'll get sacked on 3rd down any time, any day of the week,
right?
Because it doesn't matter. Like if I don't get this done and we're punting, I don't care if I get sacked here. I'm trying to make the play that's going to get the first down, not pick up 4 yards. So that kind of mentality is saying, well, you can never take a sack, or you can never try and have a turnover worthy pass because you're trying to thread a needle. That, look, you don't want Caleb Williams to make too many mistakes and really, start off on the wrong foot. But at the same time, you don't want to take away who he is. I think that's really important. And I think, it's going to be interesting to see how much control Matt Eberflus truly gives to Shane Waldron in this, and how much, because you always felt, with Luke Getsy, that there was always these Eberflus fingerprints on some of the conservative fourth quarter play calling. And I do think that does need to pivot.
And you're correct on that. And maybe that hasn't been stressed enough. And it is something where I think Matt has to understand how to give his play callers more autonomy there. It's like, just because you've crossed the kick line doesn't mean that you're settling for three. Let's go for the kill shot there. I think the Detroit game at Ford Field this year was an example where, I think there was a lot of heat, and justifiable heat, on the Bears kind of trying to manage a game late that they should have been able to manage with a 2-score lead on the road and playing the way they were playing defensively. But you don't want to just suddenly hammer the brake pedal when the light is not red or even yellow yet. Go through it, get more points, pad your lead a little bit more, and stay aggressive in a way that gives your team the best chance to win. That's not always easy for defensive minded coaches, because they want to rely on themselves. They want to rely on their unit. They want to rely on old school win with defense and running the football, football that doesn't always win in today's NFL. Like Foxy was that way in certain ways, right? Like there was a game that they beat the Carolina Panthers in 2017 when Mitch was a rookie that he still talks about to this day. I think Mitch had 4 completions in the game, and they threw for like 80 yards or something in the football game. Maybe
that Eddie Jackson had
two touchdowns for Eddie Jackson. Yeah, he scored on a fumble return and an interception, and John took such great pride in that. And it's like, okay, like I get it. Like every once in a while you got to win a game like that, but that can't be your calling card. Like today's NFL is built for your quarterback to be the star, your offense to go take over games when it matters, and you got to get there. And so I think, look, we don't know a lot about Shane Waldron. We don't know a lot about how he's going to sync up not only with Caleb Williams, but with Thomas Brown, the passing game coordinator, with Chris Morgan, who's here to kind of help ease the transition. Shane Waldron led a Seattle offense last year that in almost every major statistical category was worse than the one that the Bears put on the field in 2023. And so, like, just thinking that change is automatically improvement is probably a little bit naive. And so, like, we're going to have to hear what his vision is. We're going to have to see how he implements it. And we're going to have to see how they connect with Caleb early. Now, look, like, I think the greatest part of having the number 1 pick in a draft like this is they've had 6 weeks already to make the connection with Caleb Williams, to start introducing offensive concepts, to get him at their next meeting, to spit him back to them. It's, starts at the combine, you go to the pro day, you have him at House Hall in the top 30 visit. And now you've already had 3 touch points where you're drafting him, right? Like, you don't have to guess about it. Maybe we get him, so all that time can be productively used to start setting you up for when you walk into rookie minicamp to get this thing going. And so we're going to have to observe that really, really closely and see how it goes, because obviously, there is going to be expectation for this team. In some pockets, it's going to be incredibly unrealistic. And so the Bears are going to have to manage all of that as they kind of build that springboard for Caleb Williams.
Yeah. Now, last thing on Caleb Williams, and that's what I want to get in, is the interactions the Bears had with him. Because the one thing that I thought was interesting, and I think you could tell, and I don't know if you want to say where the concerns were, but where they wanted to investigate more, was how Caleb Williams interacted with peers and teammates. I mean, to have him at the pro day go out to dinner with his teammates, to make sure there were, DJ Moore and Tyreek Stevenson and whoever else was there at the pro day, and see how he interacted with the veterans. I think whether they were just double checking on all the wild rumors about Diva and he was a bad teammate and all that stuff, or they heard some things that had them concerns, or it was just, we know this guy is a great football player. We just need to know more about Caleb Williams, the person, and really, and Ryan Poles even mentioned that, you got to get to know the person. And I thought that was a unique approach. That's not something, I guess I'm not paying attention to how the Carolina Panthers handled Bryce Young and CJ Stroud last year in terms of their pro day visits and all. But this getting him to interact with the team thing and his teammates, I thought was an interesting angle, and not one I had really seen a lot of other teams approach.
Well, this speaks to Ryan Poles' awareness, and I do give him a lot of credit for seeing the big picture. He does have a good knack for taking a wide lens at the things that need a wide lens on them. And I think the Bears kind of crossed over into the territory of, we love Caleb Williams, the football player, by like January 5th. Their season probably wasn't even over yet. And they were like, okay, now we got to figure out not only who he is as a dude, but can he survive in our market? And Ryan's brought that up multiple times. Something I'm writing for next week has a passage that is related to the idea that it's not just the ability to handle pressure. It's the ability to handle Chicago's pressure, which I've said, like this city and this fan base is going to be a character in this story because of what we talked about a few minutes ago. It is the history, it's the patience levels, it's the expectations that you're going to have to navigate. And so some of that is just trying to get a feel for what the guy's DNA is. Who is he? How do we understand who he is and then work with him to set up the best possible environment for him to succeed? I had an AFC executive tell me in February that they were a little bit struck in talking to former teammates of Caleb's in college on the All-Star circuit, back the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the game, the East-West game that were played early in the year, that they weren't getting the universal waterfall of praise that Ryan Poles described when he met with us at the owners' meetings a few weeks ago, that there was some reservation and that there was a belief in that particular building that Caleb isn't one of these guy, fully grizzled veteran NFL quarterbacks that has a very cookie cutter way of leading in the locker room. That's okay. You just have to be aware of what that is and be able to find ways to get guys to plug into him in that way. Look, every player in the NFL will plug into a winner. Every player in the NFL will plug into a guy that can consistently elevate his play to bring others around him to the higher level. And so if Caleb can do that, he's not going to have an issue. But if there are some struggles, if there are some bumps in the road, you got to figure out a way so that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday aren't really bumpy. And some of that, I think the Bears feel great in a very ironic way that Caleb had some struggles during his 2023 season at USC, that he didn't repeat as the Heisman winner, that his team didn't win a lot of games, that they weren't playing in a premier bowl when the season ended. And so the Bears kind of celebrated to that some extent, because in Carolina, it was like, well, Bryce never really experienced a lot of prolonged struggle during his career in college. There's a loss here, a loss there, but it wasn't like, okay, that's a 3-week stretch that was really, really rocky, and we got to learn about how he handles that. We got to learn about how he lifts other people in his locker room when that turbulence and that adversity hits. The Bears got firsthand knowledge of that from the people that coached Caleb, from the people that were around him, from Caleb himself. And I think Caleb showed a maturity in the pre-draft process of saying, look, like 2023 was probably my most important season of football because it showed me that struggle is a very real part of the sport. And I've got to figure out a way to manage that in a way that I'm not only managing it for myself, but now I'm in charge of being the leader of this entire team. Heavy responsibility, but it's something that he's going to have to master quickly, because if you don't, you've seen it, Bill, you know how quickly a season can cave in on you if somebody is not able to provide that steadiness and that stability at times when you really need it.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you about the stadium, but before we do that, I just want to ask you about the ninth pick here, because that's really interesting. And of course the conversation has really pivoted to that the last couple of weeks here, once Caleb Williams was settled here. But it seems from what I can tell, a lot of people are getting this mentality that if Rome Odunze is there, if Malik Neighbors is there, great, but most likely won't be. If Rome Odunze is there at 9, that's the selection you make. And I do love Odunze as a prospect, but if the 3 wide receivers go ahead of time, that you need to trade back, and of course you need a trade partner to trade back. So there's avenues there.
Right.
But the one thing that I've really got to thinking here, and I even put something out on social media that ticked off a lot of Bears fans, because I put out a mock, off the PFF simulator that had Rome Odunze available at 9, and yet the Bears traded back with Jacksonville, moved back to 17. Jacksonville came up to take Odunze, and then I had the Bears take Byron Murphy with the 17th pick. And Bears fans said, no, you got to take the receiver with Caleb Williams. And I would fully endorse if Rome Odunze is there at 9, making that selection. But with Matt Eberflus there, with the lack of attention they have put on the defensive line this entire offseason. In fact, the defensive line is worse than it was last year because Justin Jones has left and there's been no replacement. You can say Dexter Pickens might get better, but that's the reality of what it is right now. And I know you need a trade partner to trade back.
Right.
And to me, Odunze might be the type of guy that someone wants to come up for, where if the 3 receivers are gone, the 4 quarterbacks are gone, Alt's gone, and you're in that kind of situation, that someone may not want to come up with Turner because Verse and Latu are there and things like that. So I'm looking at this and going, it would not shock me, and I'm curious where you think the Bears might go at 9, if Odunze is available at 9 and yet the Bears still choose to trade back?
Well, thanks for mentioning that the decision to trade back requires someone wanting to come up, because I think that gets lost a lot in pre-draft discussions on like, oh, well, you've got options at 9, just trade back. Somebody's got to want to come on and get number 9 for you to be able to do that. And at that point, it changes the calculus in terms of where they're picking and what your board looks like. How many prospects do you have that you are comfortable with? In 17, that's an 8 prospect jump, right? And so if your board only's got 6 guys in that next tier of prospect, you're probably going to turn down that trade and say, you know what, we're going to pick off this menu if nobody between 17 and 10 want to come up and get this. I think this is a rare year. Number one, because of the way that the quarterback board is going to unfold, and you're probably going to have 4 coming off the board before the Bears go on the clock for the second time. Number two, because of the Bears' positions of needs being pass rusher, pass catcher, and protection. It's stacked in this draft at all 3 of those things. And so like Ryan Poles is going to have a menu in his hand a little bit after 8:00 on April 25th. And he's going to look at it and go, how am I supposed to choose off of this? Because everything looks and sounds good right now. And I think that no matter what they do at number 9, we're going to be able to make a case that Thursday night and that Friday morning and through the weekend that they did the right thing, because there's that many things that can help them in that regard. I don't know internally inside their building who are the guys that are if they're there at 9, we're 100% taking them. I wish I could get more intel on that. Is Odunze one of them? Perhaps. That would give you the opportunity to then kind of play it out on the 1-year trial with Keenan Allen. And if Rome Odunze looks like he's the heir apparent, then you turn it over to him. But maybe there's, maybe Alt falls to 9 and you say, well, look, like as good as Braxton Jones is, he's a 5th round guy. And we've got a chance to add a guy that most people in the league think is going to be, as close to a sure thing in this draft as you get as a lockdown left tackle. The options there, Bill, they're so plentiful and so intriguing that I think Ryan Poles can like go to bed every night up until April 25th, understanding that whatever he does is going to be exciting and justifiable. I think their preference probably is potentially to find a trade partner, without going too far down that they cost themselves one of these guys that's on their short list of impact, immediate starter that can help us in one of 3 ways. Matty Eberflus mentioned this at the owners' meetings. He wants somebody that can, he said, affect the quarterback or help the quarterback. So again, that's protection, pass catching, or pass rush. And pass rush, as Matt made very clear, doesn't just mean an edge guy. And so that's where, when you mentioned Byron Murphy's name, I think that is a guy that will have some intrigue to them, that could come in and play that defensive tackle position and be a good fit and give them some of that pocket denting impact that they want in their defense. And if you're able to go down, make that pick, and then add a day 2 pick along with that, maybe there is some intrigue to that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like you said, we're going to be able to make the argument that Ryan Poles made the right decision. And I was actually talking about that a couple of weeks ago, that to me, it felt like, okay, like the way this plays out, something is going to be available at 9. It's either going to be Rome Odunze, the top defensive player in the draft, whoever you deem that to be, Joe Alt, or the 4th quarterback, if somehow they fall to 9, where you have an excellent chance to have a trade partner where someone would want to jump the Vikings or whoever it might be. So it starts to feel like you just do the math. One of those 4 things is happening. Like it can't be possible that they're all gone, where the fact that it does look like it plays out where 9's a great spot to be.
That's as sad as it sounds. The 5th quarterback may be in play at number 9. If you get some desperation in a building like Denver or Vegas, the 5th quarterback may be in play, where they say, we got to go get Penix. We got to go get Bo Nix here, because if not now, then when? And so look, like I would expect Ryan and Ian to be on the phones, listening to where people are at, and then also looking up at that state-of-the-art board that they have in their state-of-the-art draft room at Hallis Hall and going, man, look at this. Look at one of these guys that we can get and turn into an immediate day 1 starter here, give them their jersey tomorrow and set them loose at rookie minicamp, and off we go.
Yeah, it really does provide a great situation. And before we wrap up here, and thank you for so much time, I want to ask you about the stadium, because I've heard you and Haw talking about it on Take the North and all, and some of the stuff you've written about it. And It's definitely interesting. I think a lot of people were not expecting it to be in the direction it is right now. And I know some people are still even suggesting that it could be leverage plays still here or whatnot. But it certainly looks like it's heading towards doing something at the lakefront in the city right now. And based on where we were, that the team actually invested and bought and leveled architecture in Arlington Heights, like, and I know Kevin Warren was brought in, but Kevin Warren was brought in after the Arlington Heights purchase, where again, you sit there and say the Bears organization still tends to do things backwards. And you know, we hear Ryan Poles is, you know, he talks about breaking a cycle with how to develop a quarterback here.
Right.
There also needs to be about breaking a cycle about, and I'm just going to say it, ineptitude at the highest levels of Hallis Hall. And the way this stadium is playing out to me is just so Chicago Bears.
I need to see the end result before I fully feel that way, because I think that all these stadium projects have a ton of roller coaster helixes and drops and twists and turns and things that make you say, like, I can't figure out what they're doing. And then 6 months up the road, it becomes clear what they're doing. I think what people right now are trying to get their brains wrapped around is, as you mentioned, is this all just a heavy leverage play to try to get what they want in Arlington Heights? And a month and a half ago, I would have told you, yeah, absolutely. Talking to people within the Bears organization, including Kevin Warren, talking to people around the league at the owners' meetings who have sat in on stadium committee meetings, they don't believe that this is a leverage play, that there is a grand vision here that Kevin and the Bears believe in, that they are going to try to fight for. And so now you buckle in and you prepare for that. Before this month is up, Bill, I think the Bears are going to have a grand news conference with beautiful drawings and a video presentation that provides the brochure for what they're imagining and envisioning on the museum campus by Lake Michigan. And then what that subjects them to is follow-up questions, which, you know, there's a list, 20 deep of who's funding this, how is the public-private partnership working, where the Bears going to play while this new state-of-the-art mega event complex is being built. How does this all fit together in a way that not only makes sense for the Chicago Bears, but the city of Chicago? What are the infrastructure changes needed to the museum campus and the surrounding area to make this viable? They have not provided a lot of specifics and details on that as of yet. I think they understand that they need to create any sort of momentum with this. And then obviously you're going to have strong resistance from Chicago residents, Cook County residents that are going to say, look, like, you do what you want to do, but don't come bring in the bill to us, like, show us how you're going to pay for this. Show us how this is going to pay for itself in a way that makes this logical. The biggest takeaway for me over the last, like I say, 5 or 6 weeks is that this doesn't feel like posturing. If it's posturing, it's some of the most sophisticated and orchestrated posturing that's ever been done in the history of negotiating. This feels like a vision that Kevin Warren has to capitalize on the prestige of downtown Chicago and create an environment that can enliven the city. I think there's a little bit of a civic investment here that Kevin and George McCaskey want to see through, and we'll just see where it all goes, because again, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, a lot of details that need to be provided, and a lot of obstacles that need to be gotten around. And I think the clock is ticking a little bit, because when you enter into that purchase agreement on Arlington Heights in 2021, and now we're in April of 2024, still trying to figure out where the heck this thing's going to go, eventually patience is going to run a little thin. And what you said, that the very Bears way of doing things, it's going to be like, all right, do you guys have it together, or are you just kind of winging it, which has been sort of the fatal flaw of the Chicago Bears in a lot of different areas over my time on the beat and even further back, is that they seem to just wing it too often. And hopefully that's not a case with this very important project that they're trying to embark on.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I say it feels Bears, I'm not saying it feels like it's hopeless and they won't get to the right, solution in the end.
No, and I'm with
you. The adventure on how they're getting there just, seems very, the way this organization has run a lot.
Right. It's like drafting a quarterback and then hiring a new GM and coach and then hiring a new team president. It's the
right.
the reverse order of the way you would do things. And this feels a little bit like, okay, you felt like, particularly when they had meetings in Arlington Heights, that they were pushing along that direction. You've got all that land to work with. You paid a lot of money for that land. And I there are people that'll tell you it's not going to be that hard for them to sell that land to a developer. I don't know, like who's in the market for 326 acres for $200 million. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit ignorant on that front to think that property is just easily to offload. But there's a lot here, and you gotta hope that by the time the Bears kick off a football in September in a meaningful game, that we're not still asking the same questions about their stadium project.
Yeah, and let me ask you this. And look, you may not have an answer here, and if you don't, that's fine. And this is me just trying to get a better understanding of this project. Is part of this project to me was an understanding that the Bears wanted to increase their own personal revenue streams and get more cash on hand at Hallis Hall, which is, something that can impact them because, the McCaskies are not Stan Kroenke or Jerry Jones, where They just have hundreds of millions of dollars of cash on hand and can just, go on a free agent spending spree with all the guaranteed money that, of course, has to be put in escrow and put aside immediately. And that's not really how the McCaskies have ever operated. And it's not like it's prevented them from not signing, Jay Cutler to a huge deal or Khalil Mack or whoever it needs to be. It's not like they're operating like a mom and pop store, but they're not operating like you would think the Chicago Bears could operate. And that's because they don't have, the stadium is the Chicago Park District and all. And this was a way that they were going to be able to create revenue streams, own a stadium, host Final Fours and Super Bowls, and just have the cash flow in. But I sit there and go, well, if this stadium is going to be out on the lakefront and it's going to be with Chicago and, a similar type deal, I would think, to Soldier Field, while they could have a great stadium and it may be just a fantastic place to watch a football game and beautiful architecture around the lake and all, I don't know if it and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if it solves the problem that was part of the idea of going to Arlington Heights in the first place.
What you had in Arlington Heights was the ability to build that adjacent complex with restaurants and entertainment and residentials and things that would just open up fire hydrants worth of revenue for you that now, if you go to the museum campus, you're not going to have. So you're absolutely right. It changes the revenue picture that you were looking at. Now you will be told by people that have watched these public-private partnerships, fund stadiums in other markets, Arlington, Texas being one of them, Minneapolis, another one, that there are ways to basically diminish your financial responsibility of taking care of the building, which is in itself a bottom line, thing that helps your economic picture. But then with that, there is still the opportunity to capitalize on naming rights and PSLs and suite holders and sponsorships and all the things that if done right, and if done in a way where you create a mega complex that's hosting events 365 days a year, that those revenue streams will generate. And it seems like there's an internal belief right now that the idea of creating one of those mega event 365 day a year complexes is more viable in Chicago than it is Arlington Heights, because you can just attract more to the city of Chicago than you can to a suburb that's, a couple miles down the road from Woodfield. So, we'll see which direction they go on that. It's a really good question. It's one that needs a lot more reporting and answers from the Bears and others to figure out how all of this would work in a way, again, that is economically beneficial, not only to the Chicago Bears, but to the city. And so somebody's got to sell that. Like I say, I think by the month's end, you're going to have, I don't want to say dramatic, but maybe I should say dramatic, a dramatic unveiling of what they're envisioning there. And then everyone will kind of have to see for themselves whether they think it's realistic or not.
Yeah. And last thing here, and I know it hasn't been brought up, but I've had a lot of people ask me, and for my family's been season ticket holders of that team since before I was born. I mean, my parents went to games at Wrigley Field. Like, it's been that long that these tickets have been with my family. And so when Soldier Field was renovated with the Ted Phillips project, about 20 some years ago, the PSLs were a huge financial component. And now I have people asking, well, what's going to happen with the PSLs you paid at Soldier Field and moving to a new stadium and all? And I'm like, I have no idea, but I do know if they plan on just throwing those away, basically, and telling season ticket holders, you need to pay more, thousands upon thousands of dollars again to keep your season tickets, you're going to piss off a lot of people. And I don't know if they're going to care, because if Caleb Williams is the real deal, people are going to want to watch this football team. He may be coming at the perfect time if he pans out. But there is still a public perception here that, I think they may be a little bulletproof to it, but I still think they need to be careful.
I'm with you on that. It is a very tough balance beam to cross when you're dealing with public perception and potential hurt feelings and supply and demand curve that tells you there's someone waiting in line behind you to take what you don't want anymore. And so they're going to have to navigate that, and you have to do it gracefully. And you have to be willing to take some bullets in that process, and you got to figure out where it goes. Fascinating times. I mean, look, like the number of topics right now that have meat on the bone, from the stadium to the quarterback to the number 9 pick to all these things. It feels like this is a moment in time for the Chicago Bears, that this is a landmark year that could potentially open the window to something historic. Now, you and I have both lived through things that have been historic in a bad way. I think everyone here would be very refreshed to open up a window that is historic in a good way, where you say, wow, that was the start of 15 years of football and fun that we hadn't experienced in 4 decades, and so hopefully the Bears are able to get on that path successfully. But you know me, I'm a wait and see guy and a see it to believe it guy. So let's sit back, buckle in, and see where it all goes.
All right. Well, there he is, Dan Wiederer. And Dan, make sure you keep your notes and everything you've written for the last year or so, because 10 years from now, there may be a book that may be a really interesting topic, because you're right. This could be a very interesting pivot year. Dan, thanks for so much time. Really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Good talking to you.